It's a big surprise. Nobody thought the ocean was this deep. So all of a sudden we've got scientists saying, why is that?
Is it possible that the deepest part of our world is actually a mile deeper than the textbooks say? Modern sonar arrays just found secret slots in the ocean floor reaching down to 39,370 feet. These spots are so extreme that titanium equipment comes back with deep gouges and scorched wires. Most people do not realize that the data from these missions was quietly set aside. There are acoustic signatures and heat flashes that defy every law of biology.
The dark sea holds a world of adaptations that jars the imagination. And the deeper you go, the creepier it seems to get.
So, here is the deal. The deeper we go, the more the rules of our planet seem to break. Forbidden slots in the abyss. The Challenger Deep has always been the gold standard for the bottom of the world. It sits at 36,201 feet. That is the official number accepted by every big school and science group on the planet. But official numbers are not always the whole story. Lately, some very expensive tools used in the South Pacific and near Antarctica have seen things that do not fit. These tools found spots that go down to 39,370 feet. This is way deeper than what is in the books. The people running these tests were shocked. They checked their gear over and over, but the numbers stayed the same. Instead of celebrating, they mostly kept it quiet. At 39,000 feet, the pressure is basically impossible to imagine. It is over 17,500 pounds pushing down on every single square inch. To put it simply, it is like taking a massive skyscraper and balancing the whole thing on a small coin. Water down there is not like the water in a pool. It actually gets denser because it is being squeezed so hard. Light has not been seen in these spots for millions of years. It is a world of total blackness. Even gear made to survive the deepest known spots starts to act weird down there. Computers glitch and metal begins to groan under the weight. Between the years 2018 and 2023, several trips to these deep spots came back with very strange logs. The public reports talked about mud and temperature, but the private files were different. Those files showed things that do not have a good explanation. They found sounds that do not match any whale or fish. They found heat that spikes and disappears in a heartbeat. They even found physical damage on titanium frames that should be impossible. There is no rock down there, just soft mud, so seeing deep scratches on the metal is a huge red flag. One of the most confusing things is the total silence from the people who saw this. It is not exactly a big secret plan. It is more about being scared for their jobs. In the world of science, if you say you found a monster or a ghost, people stop giving you money for research. Admitting you saw something you cannot explain is like ending your career on purpose. So, they file the reports away and move on to things that are easier to talk about. But the data does not go away. It stays in the files, waiting for someone to notice that the ocean is much deeper than we thought. The ocean is like a giant house with many floors. The top floor has sunlight and lots of fish. As you go down, it gets darker and colder. By the time you hit 19,000 feet, you are in the abyss. But below that is the Hadal Zone, named after the underworld. This is where the trenches are. Most people think the house ends there, but these new measurements show there is a basement below the basement. They call it the ultra-deep zone. It is a place where the physics of the world start to get very shaky and strange. Some researchers believe these deep pockets aren't just holes. They might be entire ecosystems we didn't know could exist. Imagine a place where the water is so thick it feels like oil. In this zone, the rules of biology might not apply at all. We are talking about creatures that don't need oxygen or light, but instead feed on the raw energy of the Earth itself. It sounds like science fiction, but the sensor logs don't lie. Something is down there, and it is much bigger than a simple fish. Wait until you hear about the sounds that stop the entire ocean in its tracks. Unexplained rhythms of the deep. The ocean is never actually quiet. There are microphones all over the seafloor put there by the military and weather groups. They hear whales talking and ice breaking. They even hear the engines of big ships from miles away. Most of the time, they know exactly what they are hearing. But between 2019 and 2022, they recorded sounds from the 40,000-foot mark that made no sense. For starters, hands down, these are the weirdest noises ever caught on tape. The first big weird thing was a rhythmic thumping. It happened every 47 seconds and lasted for 6 hours. It was so steady that it sounded like a giant machine. Nature usually does not work on a timer like that. Animals get tired and rocks do not break in a perfect rhythm for hours. Then, it just stopped. It did not fade away. It was like someone just hit a stop button on a remote. It left the researchers staring at their screens in total confusion. This was not a whale, and it was not a volcano. It was something else entirely. Then there was the sound of metal. One internal paper described it as a dragging noise. It sounded like something huge and heavy was being pulled across the floor. This is where it gets even crazier. The seafloor at that depth is made of very soft mud. It is like flour or powder. If you drag something across it, it should not make a grinding or scraping sound. But the microphones caught the sound of hard objects rubbing together. It was loud and clear. There are no roads or metal structures 40,000 feet down. So what was making that noise? The scariest event happened when a massive crack echoed through the water. It was so loud it actually maxed out the sensors. Right after that crack, the entire area went silent for 14 minutes. No fish made a sound. No whales sang. Even the tiny shrimp stopped clicking. It was like every living thing in a 100-mile circle was hiding or holding its breath. The ocean just went dead. This kind of behavior is only seen when something very dangerous is nearby. It was an instinctive reaction from every creature in the water. When the scientists tried to explain it, they suggested ice falling or rocks breaking. But there is no ice in the tropical areas where this happened. And the rocks in those trenches do not break in a way that makes a rhythmic pulse. They also suggested the gear was just broken. That is the easy answer. But the people who looked at the raw data knew the gear was working fine. They could see the patterns, and they knew they were looking at something real. The ocean was sending a signal that everyone down there understood. The behavior of the animals after that big crack was the real proof. Big sea animals started moving away from the area in huge numbers. Fish that usually stay deep in the dark were found swimming near the surface. They were acting like they were being chased out of their homes. Something had disturbed the entire column of water from the bottom to the top. It was a warning that something was happening in the deep slots that was not supposed to happen. Some wild theories suggest that the crack wasn't a sound at all, but a massive energy discharge. If something down there is moving, it might be shifting the very crust of the Earth. We are talking about forces that make our biggest bombs look like firecrackers. If these deep slots are actually tunnels, the sounds could be echoes from deep inside the planet. What most people don't realize is that we have no idea what lies beneath that mud. It could be a hollow space or a massive structure we can't even dream of. Something was down there, and it was not just making noise. It was growing into something impossible. Shadows in the hidden trench. Life at 40,000 feet below the surface faces a monumental physical problem: the sheer, soul-crushing weight of the water. At those depths, the pressure is roughly 1,000 times higher than it is at sea level. To put that in perspective, it is like having an aircraft carrier resting on your big toe, or trying to survive at the bottom of a column of lead miles high. At that depth, most biological bodies would simply collapse. The delicate membranes that hold a cell together would be shredded, and the proteins, the tiny machines that make a body function, would stop working entirely, folded into useless shapes by the weight of the abyss. Yet, despite the impossibility of it, things live there. Scientists have spent decades trying to figure out the rule for how life survives this. They eventually discovered a specific chemical called trimethylamine N-oxide, or TMAO. This molecule acts like a piece of internal scaffolding, propping up the proteins in a fish's body so they don't get squashed. But nature has a built-in limit. There is only so much TMAO a fish can pack into its cells before the chemistry of the cell itself becomes too salty to function. Based on the math of osmosis and fluid pressure, researchers determined that no fish with a backbone, no vertebrate, should be able to survive deeper than 26,000 feet. For a long time, the deepest fish ever caught, a translucent snailfish, was found right at that biological deadline. It seemed like a hard wall that evolution just couldn't climb over. However, the rules change when you lose the backbone. Creatures like shrimp, sea cucumbers, and various extremophile invertebrates don't have the same biological bottlenecks as fish. In the deepest, darkest trenches of the world, these creatures don't just survive. They undergo a bizarre transformation known as abyssal gigantism. At the beach, you might find a tiny amphipod, a type of crustacean that looks like a shrimp, that is barely an inch long. But in the deep, these same types of creatures grow to be over a foot long. They look like something out of a low-budget horror movie. They get this big because the water is near freezing, which slows their metabolism to a crawl. In the cold, they grow slowly, but live for a very long time, and because there are almost no large predators to hunt them, they just keep growing and growing. But even these giants have their limits. The things recorded by sensors below 39,000 feet are much bigger and much stranger than any supergiant shrimp we have ever documented in a lab. The mystery deepened when cameras were sent down into these hidden slots in the Earth's crust. These automated landers caught footage that can only be described as spooky. On the edges of the high-powered LED beams, researchers saw shadows passing by, long, sleek shapes that didn't move like a jelly or a slow-crawling sea cucumber. They saw clouds of mud getting kicked up from the seafloor by something heavy and powerful. In several instances, the heavy bait bags attached to the landers, meant to attract small scavengers, were suddenly violently jerked or dragged completely out of the frame. The cameras never caught a clear, high-definition picture of what was doing the pulling. It was almost as if the creature was intelligent enough to avoid the light, or perhaps it was simply moving too fast for the frames per second of the deep sea gear. One specific sensor array detected an object moving at 13 feet per second. To a person on land, that might not sound like much, but in the deep ocean, it is an Olympic sprint. Most deep-sea life moves as slow as a snail to conserve every precious drop of energy. To see something moving at that velocity in the Hadal zone is like seeing a Ferrari driving through a graveyard. Moving that fast requires an incredible amount of fuel, which brings us to the biggest paradox of the deep. Food in the trenches is incredibly rare. There are no plants because there is no sunlight. Most life survives on marine snow, which is a polite way of describing a slow drizzle of dead skin, fish poop, and tiny bits of organic waste falling from the surface. It takes weeks for marine snow to reach the bottom, and by the time it gets there, most of the nutrients are gone. To move at 13 feet per second, an animal would need a massive caloric intake, far more than it could get by sifting through snow. It would have to be an active, high-energy hunter. But according to every textbook ever written, there is nothing big enough down there to hunt. This creates a terrifying mystery. If there is something big and fast at 40,000 feet, what is it eating? And more importantly, how is it surviving the pressure that should be turning its cells into liquid? Some researchers are beginning to whisper that these creatures might be using a completely different kind of biology. We assume everything follows the TMAO rule, but maybe they don't use the same chemicals we do. We already know there are single-celled organisms down there called xenophyophores that grow to be 4 inches wide, the size of a grapefruit. If a single cell can break the rules and get that big, what could a complex, multicellular animal do if it had millions of years of isolated evolution? The shadows seen in the videos weren't wispy or thin. They were long, thick, and moved with a muscular power that suggests a skeletal structure we haven't identified yet. It is the kind of detail that can really shock someone who thinks we've already mapped the limits of life. I'm not going to lie, the idea of an apex predator living at 40,000 feet is genuinely terrifying. If a creature can move that fast at that depth, it means it has a heart, muscles, and a circulatory system that work differently than anything we understand. It would be an alien living on our own planet. Some experts have even wondered if these trenches act as a time capsule. The deep sea is the most stable environment on Earth. It hasn't changed in millions of years. Could these be living fossils? Monsters that were supposed to have gone extinct during the time of the dinosaurs, finding a haven in the one place. Nothing else could follow them. Or maybe they are a completely new branch of the tree of life that split off in the dark, millions of years ago, evolving in total silence and crushing weight to become the true masters of the planet. While we look to the stars for aliens, we might be ignoring the fact that something fast, hungry, and massive is watching our cameras from the dark corners of our own backyard. The mystery of how they live is one thing, but how they light up the dark is even weirder. Energy flashes in the dark. The deep ocean is a kingdom of eternal shadows, a silent, oppressive void where the sun's influence expires just a few hundred meters below the surface. In the Hadal Zone, specifically within the newly discovered slots reaching depths of 40,000 feet, we have always expected a graveyard of stillness. We imagined a place where time itself slows down, crushed under the weight of 1,000 atmospheres. But the data returning from our most recent deep-sea deployments has shattered that image of a quiet abyss. These slots are not silent, and they are certainly not dark. Our cameras, lowered into the freezing blackness, did not capture the gentle shimmer of a lone jellyfish. Instead, they recorded something violent, impossible, and blinding. Bioluminescence is a well-documented phenomenon. We understand the chemical reactions that allow a deep-sea dragonfish to glow or a jellyfish to pulse with rhythmic neon lights. These are small, localized events meant for survival, tricking a predator or attracting a mate. However, the energy flashes recorded at the bottom of these slots are of an entirely different magnitude. These were not biological flickers. They were massive, atmospheric-scale explosions of light that occurred in a liquid medium. One specific event, now whispered about in hushed tones across research vessels, lasted for a staggering 8 seconds. In the context of the deep ocean, 8 seconds of sustained, brilliant white light is an anomaly that defies every known law of marine biology. The cameras were not just overexposed. Their sensors were physically scarred by the intensity of the photons. The footage returned as a flat, haunting, white wall, as if the camera had been staring directly into the heart of a sun. The energy required to produce such a light at a pressure of approximately 18,000 pounds per square inch is astronomical. To sustain it for 8 seconds suggests a power source that we cannot currently identify. Some early skeptics suggested sonoluminescence, the phenomenon where bubbles collapsing in a liquid produce a flash of light. But sonoluminescence requires rapid, violent pressure changes, the kind found in a laboratory or near a high-speed propeller. At the bottom of a 40,000-foot trench, the pressure is a constant, heavy, and unwavering crush. Bubbles do not simply pop there. They are crushed into non-existence long before they can generate light. The thermal data was even more terrifying than the light. Sensors shielded by inches of specialized titanium and synthetic foam recorded the ambient temperature jumping from a steady 34 degrees to over 100 degrees in less than 3 seconds. In the physics of the deep sea, this is considered a thermal impossibility. The ocean is the ultimate heat sink. To raise the temperature of that much water by nearly 70 degrees in such a short window requires a release of energy equivalent to a small tactical explosion. Yet, just as quickly as the heat arrived, it vanished. The temperature plummeted back to freezing almost instantly. There was no cool-down period, no lingering warmth that you would expect from a volcanic vent or a tectonic rift. It was as if a massive subterranean engine had been toggled on for a moment of peak performance and then immediately deactivated. When the recovery teams finally winched the gear back to the surface, the physical state of the equipment confirmed the nightmare. The internal housings, which remained bone dry and sealed against the pressure, contained melted circuitry and scorched wires. This was not the result of a short circuit caused by salt water. It was the result of pure, radiant heat penetrating through the metal. Something at the bottom of that slot had generated enough thermal energy to melt silicon and copper inside a protected chamber. The scientists who opened the canisters didn't find data. They found a blackened mass of fused technology that smelled of ozone and burnt plastic. This has led to the plasma tectonic theory, which is perhaps the most grounded of the wilder explanations. Some geophysicists suggest that the pressure at 40,000 feet is so great that it is forcing the very minerals of the Earth's crust into a new state of matter. As the plates grind together, they might be generating massive piezoelectric discharges, essentially underground lightning, that ionizes the water and creates bubbles of superheated plasma. This would explain both the blinding light and the localized, instantaneous heat. If this is true, it means the floor of the ocean is not a bed of mud, but the surface of a gargantuan natural battery that is constantly short-circuiting. But there are even wilder theories emerging from the fringe. Some suggest that these flashes are the synaptic firing of the planet itself. They argue that the Earth's core and mantle interact with the ocean through these deep slots in a way that mimics a neural network. Each flash could be a signal, a burst of information being passed through the crust. In this view, the slots are not just cracks in the Earth. They are the interface between the biological world and the geological heart of the planet. We might be looking at the brain of the Earth, and our sensors are being destroyed because they are essentially bugs crawling across a high-voltage processor. Another theory posits that we are witnessing subcritical venting. At these depths, water enters a state where it is neither a liquid nor a gas. This subcritical water can dissolve solid rock and carry an immense electrical charge. These flashes could be the result of this exotic water being expelled from the mantle, reacting violently with the normal seawater of the trench. If the Earth is truly breathing in this way, these slots are the nostrils of a planetary organism, venting the buildup of internal pressure and exotic chemistry. Every heat spike is a breath, and every flash is the friction of the planet's internal life being forced into our world. Gravity of the deep slots. If the energy flashes in the dark represent the voice of the deep, the physical scars on the ocean floor are its handwriting. For decades, we believed the bottom of the deepest trenches to be a place of perfect, undisturbed silt, a repository of marine snow that has settled over millions of years. But the mapping of the 40,000-foot slots has revealed a landscape that looks more like a construction site than a graveyard. The sonar images show deep, rhythmic furrows in the sediment, some over a yard wide and hundreds of yards long. These are not the random marks of a current, nor are they the trails of slow-moving deep-sea organisms. They look like something incredibly heavy was dragged across the floor with immense purpose, and then simply lifted away. The physical evidence of something massive moving in the dark became undeniable in 2021. A research team deployed a heavy-duty lander, a machine built of grade 5 titanium, designed to withstand the crushing weight of the entire water column. For 14 hours, it sat in the silence of the slot, transmitting basic telemetry. But when it was recovered, the scientists were horrified to find 3 jagged parallel gouges ripped into the primary support pillar. These marks were 18 inches long and nearly an inch deep. To gouge titanium of that thickness requires a force that should not exist in nature. There are no rocks at 40,000 feet. There is only a soft, gelatinous powder of organic remains and fine clay. It was as if something with claws stronger than industrial steel had reached out of the darkness and tried to taste the machine. Then there is the mystery of the missing gear. During one mission, a secondary sensor unit, the size of a refrigerator, was dropped to collect core samples. The team tracked its descent until it touched the bottom. 40 minutes after landing, the signal went flat. When they returned with a camera-equipped ROV to retrieve it, the sensor was gone. There were no pieces of broken glass, no shredded metal, and no sign of an implosion. Instead, they found a perfectly circular hole in the mud where the sensor had been sitting. It hadn't been crushed. It had been removed. The sediment around the hole was packed hard, as if something had applied downward pressure before lifting the object out. This physical displacement is tied to a series of gravity anomalies that have recently been confirmed by satellite data. High-precision gravimeters have noticed that the pull of gravity is not uniform over these slots. In some areas, it is significantly stronger, and in others, it is inexplicably weaker. This suggests that beneath the floor of these trenches, there is a concentration of mass so dense it distorts the local gravitational field. This isn't just molten rock, it is something far heavier. Some geologists believe that the extreme pressure of the ocean above is squeezing the mantle into a metallic state, creating pockets of superdense matter that pull on everything around them. This leads to the gravity trap theory. Some researchers believe that the slots act as a natural funnel for the planet's tectonic stress. In this view, the gravity anomalies are caused by mass loading, where the Earth is actually denser in these spots, because it is holding back the internal pressure of the core. The scratches on the landers and the missing gear might not be the work of a creature, but the result of localized gravity, glitches. If gravity fluctuates wildly, an object could be crushed or hurled against the trench walls by its own weight. The circular holes in the mud might be spots where gravity briefly intensified, pulling the equipment down into the very crust of the Earth. However, a much wilder theory is gaining traction among those who study the missing equipment: the automated maintenance hypothesis. This theory suggests that the deep slots are not natural formations at all, but are part of a massive ancient geoengineering project. The tracks in the mud are the tread marks of autonomous machines that have been tending to the Earth's crust for eons. These machines, composed of materials we don't understand, might perceive our sensors as trash or contaminants on the work floor. The missing gear wasn't stolen by a monster. It was cleaned up by a planetary maintenance system that has been keeping the Earth's tectonic plates in alignment since before humans existed. Finally, there is the most unsettling theory of all: the dimensional sieve. Some theoretical physicists argue that the combination of extreme pressure, 18,000 pounds per square inch, and the specific electromagnetic properties of the trench walls creates a thinning of the fabric of spacetime. The gravity anomalies are not caused by dense rocks, but by mass leaking in from another dimension. This would explain why objects disappear without a trace, and why our sensors record energy spikes that don't follow the laws of our thermodynamics. The slots might be soft spots in our reality where the rules are different. The things that scratched our landers might not even be fully here in our world. Could there be a whole different world living in the pressure of the deep trenches that we are not supposed to see? What do you think is making those sounds? Make sure to like and subscribe for more deep-sea mysteries.